music as well, I think, is having a really strong year. Ooh, the Dua background. I can't wait to talk about her. Um, you know, I was kind of working backwards, just making sure I didn't miss any albums. And I just kind of found myself throwing another one on there that I wanted to mention, throwing
Mhm.
another one on there I wanted to mention. This is a really strong year. And I really didn't put down a lot of like the up and coming rappers and hip hop artists we've been reviewing who will hopefully be announced soon for XXL Freshman, because there is just so many of them that to like pull one out from all of them, I feel like they've all put out pretty quality albums.
Mhm.
So maybe you put a couple on there we can highlight, but I wanted to kick off this conversation with two rap albums that have come out recently from very established artists, Run the Jewels 4 and
Mhm.
Freddie Gibbs Alfredo, which for hip hop albums this year and rap albums, those are probably my top two, I'd have to say. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. They're kind of like objectively excellent. It's really hard to argue against them. And Run the Jewels 4, despite it being largely recorded ahead of, I think completely recorded ahead of the current moment, is something that came at the perfect time and really spoke, I think, in a meaningful way about stuff. You know, there has been a wave of protest music, particularly in hip hop. A lot of it's a bit more surface level, but Run the Jewels, I think largely because Killer Mike is a bit more involved in politics than anyone else in music. Um, they do have a lot to say, and it also is going to hit hard and be in your face, like all Run the Jewels music is. So that's really good. And Freddie Gibbs, I mean, he basically can out rap anyone, and he did it again with The Alchemist this time, just like he did with Madlib last year.
Yeah, for both of those to be released, like I think 2 weeks or so apart,
Right.
and then Run the Jewels to capture moments so much and feel so of what's happening right now, and then Freddie Gibbs, I think Alfredo to feel almost like a bit timeless. Like it really feels like it could have been dropped 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even like 20 years ago, and it would have felt just fine. It would have felt it's just as good. So really impressive. Both of those albums. What else has made your best of music list so far?
Yeah, so like you, I feel like I have a lot I added. You know, I actually did some kind of like top level looking at the info on this year so far, and it's funny. Hip hop, as we know, does dominate the industry, particularly streaming, and you can look no further than just like the number one album in the country each week. Um, the Weekend was number one album for
Hmm.
4 weeks, basically all of April. We can talk about him in a second. If we discount the Weekend's 4 weeks, there were only 6 other weeks this year where the number one album in the country was not a rap album. Harry
Wow.
Styles, the first week of the year, which is an old album. Then we
Hmm.
have 1 week each for Selena, Bieber, BTS, Kenny Chesney, and Lady Gaga. Everybody
Wow.
else was a rapper.
Only one of those is good too. That's
I
kind of
know
funny.
it's ridiculous. Um, and then I was looking at the number one song in the country, which is something that obviously the stands love to talk about. Go at chart data. You can get into that if you want. But we we had a lot of like records being set with new number ones every single week, basically for this long stretch of time. And we basically had an 8 week run where we had a new number one song in the country each week. It's kind of nuts, but nothing seemed to like hold that spot. Like we had The Box dominate for 11 weeks. We had Blinding Lights for 4 weeks, two songs from last year, by the way. Other than that, we had The Baby's Rockstar just recently, 2 weeks at number one. Everything else, just 1 week. So it's kind of weird. I wonder if this is product of quarantine or just the way streaming has continued to take over, where artists can only push for that number one spot and they're going to fall back, like
Mhm.
Say So and Savage and 2C Slide, you know,
Yeah.
Rain on Me, etc. You know, it's kind of interesting to see how that's changed.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I don't know if I guess reflecting on my own listening, I don't feel like there's a difference. I actually just feel like I'm listening to more music now because I feel like when I'm at my office, I don't usually find myself like throwing something on Spotify. But now I'm
Mhm.
home, I'll throw a playlist on, throw an album on, something
Right.
along those lines.
I think it is also important to note, literally every song I think that hit number one this year, with the exception of maybe Stuck With You from Bieber and Ari, every one of these songs is a major TikTok hit
Yeah.
with a trend. And I think TikTok is a big part of music now. You can read about the rising costs that it takes to promote music on TikTok now. There's a great Rolling Stone article about that, but TikTok does seem to be driving overall consumption and overall chart success, and TikTok is not new really by any stretch. And we've talked about it before, but I think it truly got to the center of mainstream attention in quarantine.
For
And
sure.
it certainly is affecting everything else.
Yeah, people just on their phones more, man. And, gotta pass the time somehow. Uh, by the way, follow Dave on TikTok. He puts out some good content on there sometimes. Was it at Dave Martinson?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
I think.
follow him. So we talked about those two rap albums. I think it only makes sense because you brought them up to talk about The Weeknd real quick. After Hours dropped back in, is that March?
Yeah,
Jeez,
yeah,
end of February.
basically right when quarantine started. Yeah, it was the end of March.
And man, I think we both really liked this because it felt like The Weeknd blending that dark dark side of himself with the poppy side he's been trying to adopt. And
Uh-huh.
I think he was finally able to fuse that in a way that felt very genuine. The music is glimmery and glitzy while also being kind of harrowing and disturbing at times. And this whole like vibe that he took on with this, the glasses, the bloody cut up
Mhm.
face, the big afro, it really just all works for him. It feels like this is The Weeknd at his apex.
Yeah, definitely. It's clearly his best work to date because it's the truly, I think, perfect union of what we want The Weeknd to do. And like you said, we have these dark, lights off music, Lothario nature that we know is throughout all The Weeknd's music, everything that's so hedonist about his lyrics, right? And like you said, we're combining that with the more pop sensibilities we've had for almost 5 years from him now. And you're still, it's manifesting in what his biggest hits from this are Heartless and Blinding Lights, which are blatant 80s glitz, not
Yeah.
unlike past hits that he's had, like Can't Feel My Face, but the deeper cuts on After Hours still really hit and continue that vibe you're getting, songs like Faith and Snow Child and Scared to Live, right?
Yeah.
There's so many good ones. So yeah, I think it's easily his best work to date, and probably will be a contender for album of the year. When the Grammys happen next year.
Absolutely got to be up there. I think Dua Lipa might be up there too, at least if we were the people running the Grammys, because her newest album this year, Future Nostalgia, and it should have been Future Nostalgia, just absolute fire. Maybe has the song of the year, in my opinion, on it. It's funny because I think I've been more into pop music over the last 2 or 3 years as we've been talking about more and more around the pod. And seeing Dua just kind of like become the new Madonna is really fun to watch. And I think you really get that Future Nostalgia. I know you're a big fan of it. Tell me why.
Yeah, well, Future Nostalgia is great because it continues the evolution of Dua as an artist that we saw since she started to blow up in 2017, because it's complete dance pop and like 80s throwback, right? And we had known that she was dabbling in that and good at that with previous songs like One Kiss and Electricity. But to really actually make a whole album around that that sound, and deliver, I think, in such a way where it feels so cohesive and really does play to her strengths.
Oh yeah.
I still really love the album, and Don't Start Now, which came out last year, is kind of like one of those like perfect songs in this mold. But once the album came out, we also got Levitating, which is another song that just is completely infectious and fantastic. So yeah, I think she gets a little, I think, deeper and more introspective towards the end of this album, and that does kind of come up abruptly maybe, but kind of similar to The Weeknd, the album knows what vibe it has, and the artist can deliver on that really well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. I think just thinking about Dua moving forward as she kind of continue to transcend into hopefully that queen of pop. This just feels like an album where she can totally build off this, and she's been doing that, but this just feels like a more complete album than she's put out yet. And that's just, I think, a really good sign for her as she, as I said, continues to be this rising huge international star. Someone else that's an international star, maybe not on Dua Lipa's level anymore, but once was Lady Gaga, dropping Chromatica a couple weeks ago. You know, really strong concept album where we kind of see her returning to this pure pop sound, you know, and it's been a little while, you know. She did Stars Born. We had
Joanne in 2016,
Joanne.
a while ago.
The album with Dean, was it Dean Martin? No,
Tony Bennett.
Tony
That was
Bennett.
even earlier, like 2015, 14.
So we've seen her exploring these genres, but returning to form here on Chromatica, at least in terms of pop form. I think this album's really strong. I think there's some really strong pop songs on here. And if you go back to a review, really the biggest nitpick I think we had was the song sequencing on the album didn't always seem to totally make sense. And I think
Yes.
if that's our biggest critique of the album, that's a really good sign for the quality on there.
Yeah, Rain on Me comes up way too early, given the sadder shit that comes later.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about Lady Gaga. I was thinking about some other artists too, because 2020, we have seen a lot of acts come back after long layoffs. And Gaga actually is not even one of the longer ones I'm really thinking about. But in addition to her releasing a solo album again, you have Grimes coming back after 5 years, Justin Bieber, Sam Hunt, The Strokes, Tame Impala, and perhaps the most mind-blowing of all, Jay Electronica actually releasing his debut album. That's a lot of albums that were highly anticipated to various levels, all coming out. And of course, Little Uzi Vert, not nearly as long a wait, but something that had a tremendous hype leading up to it, you know? Yeah. So, and Fiona Apple as well, delivering after a very long time. So it's pretty cool. It doesn't happen like that all the time.
Yeah, that's really good point.
We are expecting Adele later in the year as well, which would be another long wait.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about how, like, someone like Fiona Apple, even Pearl Jam, even though that's maybe not the best of the long waits that came out, you had all these people dropping. I think actually Jay Electronica might be my biggest disappointment this year. I think it's almost unfair because the bar was set so high for him, and I don't know if he ever could have dropped an album that would have lived up to the hype. But because it's been so anticipated for so long, for that album to be, I think, just okay, you know, not Jay's best work, a bit disappointing. But I did feel like those ones you mentioned, Fiona Apple and Tame Impala, really stood out to me as very strong albums this year. Tame, obviously, one of my favorite bands, so I'm a bit biased, but I think the way that they infuse like that 80s dance sound into their normal like psychedelic rock sound really just blended well. Even if there's some long moments on the album, I think it's still really solid. And Fiona Apple, I think, just continues to solidify herself as probably the best songwriter out there right now, or at least in terms of lyrics and meaning, to capture the moment with Fetch the Bolt Cutters. That album is a quarantine album and I think empowerment album, just really impressive. Any other albums that stood out to you that you want to mention here real quick?
Yeah. So I really enjoyed BTS dropping Map of the Soul 7, which was definitely their biggest and most successful album in the West to this point. I think probably their most successful album ever. And I think is a really accessible album to people that are concerned or confused about what the hell K-pop is, especially after
concerned
K-pop stans have
been trolling the president.
Infiltrated Trump events.
Yeah, so K-pop fans and TikTokers saving the world one rally at a time.
There was that Fox News clip where it's like fans of the band K-pop. It's like, God, you guys are morons. But yeah, no, in all serious, I think BTS have been able to cross over to the West without compromising the music they make. And that's really evident on that album. It's a long album. There's a lot there. Not everything's that good. But I think the highs of an act like BTS or an act like Blackpink that's beginning to gear up for an album later in the year as well, you really can't deny them. And
No.
they appeal to everyone. So shout out to BTS.
Yeah. And I think another person you really can't deny is Megan the Stallion at this point, dropping Sugar. You know, maybe not Megan's strongest work, but man, there's some songs on there that are just classic her, and they're catchy and badass, and like whether it's Captain Hook, I mean,
BITCH,
yeah,
Savage.
Just the whole album is
and it's funny to reflect on that now, because when we talked about that EP, it was, on the lines of her beefing with her label and getting paid and stuff like that, right? And then we were noting that it didn't look like the EP was going to sell all that well in its first week, despite the pretty notable star that Megan had already risen to, coming off a really strong 2019. And then fast forward a few weeks later, and Savage is the number one song in the country and has a remix from Beyonce. TikTok really does make things happen. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah. I think I just wanted to shout out one more person. Maybe we can throw a couple out there that we liked, but we don't want to spend too much time on because we are running a little bit long. Charlie XCX, I think, is the last one you mentioned, who really captured this quarantine moment. Fiona Apple also similarly had a quarantine album, but How I'm Feeling Now from Charlie, just such an impressive album in terms of her putting it together within a couple of weeks. Doing a lot of it, I think, remotely with her producers, writing it with fans. It's just a real pleasure, and it continues to blend her futuristic pop sound with her, I think, ability to be fairly vulnerable in her writing about things she's going through, things she's dealing with. And again, not every song on that album I think is perfect, or it's not. I think there's some skips, but still really strong showing from Charlie.
Definitely. Yeah. A few others I'd want to shout out. Really like Soccer Mommy this year. Really like Kalani, Moses Subney.
Yeah. Gray.
R.I.P. Pop Smoke. His last project was really good. Meet the Woo Volume 2. And then you mentioned there's so many young rappers to mention all of them. But I think my two favorites this year would be Polo G and Chef G. Brooklyn, Chicago, really repping. And Polo G in particular dropping Wishing for a Hero, which flips Tupac's Changes. And a song that feels quite prescient at these times.
Definitely. Just a couple more I wanted to shout out real quick. Perfume Genius, love their new album. Christine and the Queens, their La Vida Nuova EP probably has one of the top songs of the year on it.
Definitely.
And a couple others that really shine. And then 070 Shake, dropped an album very beginning of the year. Anticipated if you were tuned into the Kids See Ghosts album from last year, and really I think a strong first showing. I have a lot of hope for Shake moving forward. I mentioned earlier J Electronica might be my biggest disappointment. Do you have one album that's really let you down this year?
Yeah, let me think. I was quite let down by Justin Bieber's album.
Yeah.
Justin Bieber's been in some hot water of late due to some allegations, but, going into that album, Changes, coming off of the ridiculous highs that Purpose had and the long wait that followed that, and the much publicized, I think, reckoning with Bieber's personal life and coming to a better mental health for him, just to deliver a really lukewarm album that just doesn't stick with you at all. And really, there are some technical hits on that in terms of the numbers they've done, like Intentions, and Yummy, but like I was really, really let down by it.
Yeah, as you should be. I think I was probably most disappointed by DaBaby. Just continues to feel mediocre to me. Doesn't really change things up or experiment enough to feel interesting for the amount of acclaim he gets, at least in my opinion.
Number one song of the country, though, Rockstar, and it doesn't even have a good Roddy feature. Kind of perplexing to me.
Yeah. Uh, it's similar to Nicki doing stuff with 6ix9ine, right?